One. All right. Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of Your Morning Cup with Q and J. All right, Q, what's going on?
Um, so last time we had our podcast before the election,
Yes.
um, and now we know the results, which is good. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
Unfortunately, there's an attempted coup going on in the US, so that's where
Yes.
we're at. It's not being done very well because everyone involved is an idiot, but it's still the larger picture is that it's disturbing that it's even happening to begin with,
It is.
in one of the oldest democracies in the world.
I
Um,
know.
so, but besides that, I think it's just COVID is still ravaging everywhere. In California, we just got a message from the governor where there's now a curfew in place. I think that
Wow.
it starts tomorrow. Um, the curfew is that you can't go outside. You can't go outside and travel unnecessarily, like non-essential travel between 10
Mm-hmm.
and 5 a.m. And it's a difficult call, especially when um, Thanksgiving is happening,
Mm-hmm.
and a lot of the not that's just Thanksgiving, but all these major winter holidays are coming up. So
Yes.
um, yeah, it's not surprising to me, but it's still unfortunate. But that's what's going on in my world.
Yes. 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 Same here. I think the governor of Colorado and the mayor of Denver, they have moved to the red zone. There's I think our the state of Colorado is color coded, and
Mm-hmm.
I don't know the colors, but I just know that they moved to the red zone, which is this. It's not complete lockdown yet, and pretty much all indoor dining is closed. Yeah, it was over summer. It was 50%. Then last month it went down to 25%,
Mm-hmm.
and now it is no indoor dining. And what else? Of course, no group gathering. In all the public space, like indoor, you have to wear a mask. So even my building, in the hallways, in the elevators, we have to wear mask is required now. So yeah, I think states are ramping up with more restrictions.
Yeah, I think what I've noticed more and more is COVID fatigue, um,
Mm-hmm.
where people are just tired of the
Oh
pandemic,
yeah. Oh
and
yeah.
I get it. I totally get it. Um, I think I actually was talking to a friend about this the other day, and in California we also have color tiers. Purple is the most restrictive, so we moved back to
Mm-hmm.
purple.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and it's by counties. So in Orange County, we were in red for a while, which is
Mm-hmm.
not the most restrictive. It's kind of like number two restrictive. But LA County was in effectively purple all this time, um,
Mm-hmm.
which is like no indoor dining, no gyms opening. Um, so when the gyms opened here, I started going just because for me it's a really great outlet for my mental health.
Mm-hmm.
I always wore a mask. And I was always like wiping down my equipment just because
Yes.
even if not non-COVID time, it's like wipe down your equipment. It's gross,
Yes. Yeah.
um, just putting it out
Exactly.
there. But one of the things I noticed, I because I'm public health and I looked at numbers a lot and I was reading a lot of papers.
Mm-hmm.
Um, there, from what I saw, there was this paper that was released and it was about in spring this year that said
Mm-hmm.
um, restaurants, gyms, places of worship were like the top with, and there's another one. It's like there was a top four super spreader sites. And I
Mm-hmm.
looked at the number and I said, okay, well, let's look at this more closely. And it boiled down to it's like this is when before masks were implemented, widespread masks.
Yes.
And I said, okay, well, in the spring, we weren't super sure how this disease was transmitted. And then it became clearer and clearer. It's like, it's not surfaces, it's aerolized, it's droplets.
Mm-hmm.
So masks are very effective. Um, so when I was looking at this number, I said, honestly, the ultimate super spreader is indoor dining. Um,
Mm-hmm.
there was this really phenomenal case in South Korea
Mm-hmm.
where over a period of I think 2 or 3 hours, a bunch of people who attended a Starbucks got COVID because one of the patrons asymptomatic.
Yeah.
And they took down their and when you're eating inside Starbucks, you take off your
Mm-hmm.
mask.
Mm-hmm.
But the thing is, none of the employees got COVID. None of them.
Mm-hmm.
And they're all wearing masks the whole time. So I
Yes,
remember
yes.
reading that case study and I said, all right, well, this really shows me that masks are so effective. There's also about the circulation. So I remember seeing these when, I saw these, Orange County going up to purple again. And I was like, okay. And then, a friend of mine was getting mad and frustrated, and another friend said, "Look, this is anything shows that it's not gyms that are
Yes,
causing
yeah.
it. Because if it was gyms, then LA County's cases would have gone down.
Yes.
And in fact, they just stayed the same. In fact, they went up. And the other super spreader that I've just realized, I'm like, it's personal gatherings.
Yes, indoor
Party.
house parties. Yeah.
So with no social distancing for at all, and no mask, and so when I see these numbers go up in LA, I'm like, oh yeah, no, it's not indoor dining, and it's definitely not. I mean, indoor dining can be a cause, but it's definitely not the gyms if you're in compliance. It's
Exactly.
those home gatherings. So I think it'll be interesting to see how much the cases rise
Mm-hmm.
this holiday and winter season, just because it is, people are exhausted. They don't want, and I get it, like the mental health component is really
Yes.
debilitating, and they don't want to do this anymore. At the same
Yes.
time, it's like, this is the time to be the most cautious. Like, it's
Yes. Like I was reading that in Denver, I think the number, if I remember correctly, in Denver County, is 1 in 64 people has COVID.
mm,
1 in 64. And in the surrounding counties, I think it's 1 in 54.
mm,
So even Denver is more condensed. I think people in the city are practicing a little bit more, like wearing masks, social distancing. I think people in a little bit in the suburb area will in the rural area, they think that because they are so spread out, well, ish, that they are fine. Therefore, I think they're a little bit less disciplined in wearing masks with social distancing. So
mm,
that's why the numbers are different. So I was a little bit surprised with the
mm.
numbers, and then I agree that like you know yeah, I do miss going out to restaurant. Well, actually, more to bar than a restaurant. Just sitting in the. You remember, like we went to Angelo's, my favorite bar. Like the first place we went to, it was so crowded. You remember how beautiful that bar is? I just miss going there, sitting at the bar, chit chatting with the regulars, well, my neighbors. Like that I miss. And at the same time, fortunately, over the summer, we were able to sit outside, so that helped tremendously. And and I was talking to my friend, like he's one. I think he belongs to one of those groups that like that very against lockdown, we're closing down businesses. He's the one that thinks that economy is more important. Economy and freedom are more important
Mm.
than people's health. And you know what? I how do you say it? Like I can see, it's a spectrum of concern. You know. Oh, by the way, if you hear some like weird sound, my neighbors upstairs decided to do some remodeling, so I apologize for that weird squeaky sound.
No
So
worries. Yeah, I think it's interesting. I think, unfortunately, this pandemic has been presented as a binary, like
Mhm.
either you're, and it's not true. That's the thing. I think um, the economy and public health are not mutually exclusive. And
Exactly.
they've never
Yes.
been mutually exclusive. If anything, it's like, I'm going to just go to something more basic. Okay, we have the FDA. The FDA is about food safety,
Yes.
That's a public health component. Like, I don't want to be going, like, it's not good for business or for my health if I go to the store and get food that has salmonella. It's just not,
Exactly.
Um,
So yeah, so grocery stores or restaurant, they have to spend some budget in checking the food quality. Yeah, they just yeah.
yeah, so that's a basic one. And I think, unfortunately, a lot of this mindset was established very early on by the lack of centralized leadership. The messaging early, I watch early spring briefings about the pandemic,
Uh huh.
and I saw immediately how public health practitioners were being positioned as the enemy of
Mm-hmm,
um,
mm-hmm.
of quote unquote freedom. And
Yes.
I think the problem is that it's like, public health practitioners in general are not the best communicators, and that's a huge issue
Mm-hmm.
within public health.
Yes.
Where, yeah, they come from, there's still a line, there's still a history of paternalistic tendencies, which I'm against.
Mhm.
But in this case, it was like, it was just like a conflux of all these bad actors coming together and framing public health as, like, quote unquote, the enemy of the
Yes.
economy. And the reality is, like, no, it's like, you can't have an economy if everyone's dead. Like, let's be
Yes.
perfectly honest. And I also sympathize a lot, like, I really do. I sympathize a lot for businesses. It's
Mm-hmm.
incredibly difficult. um I think, unfortunately, now we're at the point where you have some business owners who are like, I don't care about public health. I really don't care about public health guidelines. Like, I need to stay afloat. I get it. I don't agree, but I get it. And then there's business owners who see the longer term effect of, like, I, y- I want to keep my business afloat, and I also want to keep my community healthy and safe. Um, and the thing is like, when I look at the science and the data now, um, we could have, when people say back to normal, I'm like, I'm gonna be perfect. Like, I think if we had had clear communication from leaders, and because, and you know, people model their behaviors after who they see on the screen. And if people in positions of power had modeled behavior that said, hey, this is going to be rough for a while,
Mm-hmm.
we can get through this together. Let's work together, be safe. Let's beat this pandemic. We can still go to Disneyland. We can still go to restaurants. We can still do this. If we all wear a mask, here's the trade-off just for now as we work on a vaccine.
Yes.
It was completely, I mean, it's totally doable. Like, you look at South Korea, you look at Taiwan, you look at, any other developed country that's in a way they're handling it.
Mm-hmm.
I think too is like, especially, I think South Korea is a really great example because they are incredibly aggressive about contact tracing
Mm-hmm.
and allowing for free testing, free COVID testing, like COVID testing to be super, super easy.
Mm-hmm.
Um, just for scale, one of my really good friends from years ago, he texted me, he said, I was exposed to COVID. And I said, oh my God, are you okay? And, it turned out he's fine, tested negative for COVID. When he eventually found a test, he tested negative for COVID. And I was like, oh, thank God. But the ordeal he had to go through to find the test, to get tested, and how much he had to pay to get tested to see if, he had it, so because he didn't want to infect anyone else, was absurd. You know, there's all these insane barriers in the
It
US.
is, yeah, they are. Especially, unfortunately, I'm going to say it that some of those more more conservative states. They have all these. I think I call like really stupid barriers. Like for example, in Colorado, I got tested, and it was so easy. I went online, I scheduled it, drove through down the street, just drove through, got tested for free.
Hmm.
I got tested within 3 days of my appointment. And this I'm talking about early on to back in June. And
Hmm.
within 48 hours, I got my result back. It just it just makes things so much easier. And then and I kind of want to connect back to what you were saying, that part of this economy and mental health. And and I agree that like my friend's perspective is on more that like there's a small business owner put their life saving into those businesses, and with all these lockdowns we are hurting them, we are making them belly flop up, bankruptcy. And yeah, I agree, in a way I agree. At the same time, like back to what you were saying, that like what happened if those businesses causing communities to get sick, and still same result, that these businesses won't have clients, they still can't make money. That's one. Second is what happened if those business owners get COVID. I see, those medical bills are coming back and they look scary. Even with insurance, I'm talking about one medical bill I saw with like this individual with this family has insurance, pretty good insurance. They still have to pay like up to like $350,000 out of pocket. So that is a lot of money. So, and I think the crossroad here is that I think my friend is just having a hard time. He makes good money. He loves going out, have a drink, to eat, to socialize. I think that he's, even though he's finding ways to replace that, but I think that the deeper issue is that he's struggling mental healthy, because not be able to go out to eat or drink like me, not be able to go to my favorite restaurant or bar to sit there and drink. Yes, it sounds horrible. At the same time, it's more like an inconvenience, you know. And so I think that the mental health aspect of this, we're going to continue this lockdown at least for the next couple of months, or this heightened awareness or concern. I think people really need to. My recommendations I use this time to really understand how to be alone, how to be with their thoughts. I know, what was that saying? A couple of years ago, I read that the saying that like, the scariest thing is be by yourself, be with your thoughts. It's scarier than any movies, scary movies, scarier than any disappointments. It is. And I think our society, our culture, our materialism, our phone, our social media have continuously, I'm talking about before COVID, have continuously distracted us to grow internally, to be better with our thoughts, to be better with ourselves. And when this pandemic hit, that including myself, which I've been working on myself for decades, for years, that I still finding hard time that now these external distractions are not there. I have to be with my thoughts, and that's scary. So
Oh yeah, no, absolutely. I'm so glad you brought that up. And for me, in a strange, sad way, this pandemic was quite beneficial for me in multiple fronts. My boyfriend and I had just started dating like a few months. Things were going really well. I will say like this, I'm like 2020 was a really rough year, okay? Like if you want to see how compatible you are with someone, get quarantined with them. Just get quarantined. Um, Go through the murder of George Floyd together and have those really difficult discussions, and then go through the 2020 election together. So in a sad, strange way, it really established. I'm like, okay, I get along really well with this person. This is great. For myself personally too, before the pandemic really hit, I was really just working so much. I never slowed down. I never took time to really like clean up, like organize some things that, and really focus on projects. So when the pandemic hit and I was forced to stay home, you know, I know it was really hard for everybody. It was hard for me too. And the hardest is when movie theaters close. Oh my God, movie theaters closing was like, oh, okay, it was just like you're just sitting there, you're like, okay, I get it, especially as a public health person, you're like, I get it, but it sucks,
Yeah.
Um, but for me, it was the way I approached it from the beginning. I looked at this situation, I looked at reality. I said, this is our current political reality, this is our current public health reality, this is our current societal reality, which you just listen, like everyone's like, like so distracted easily. I'm like, I need this time to buckle down. This pandemic is not going away anytime soon. Anyone who thinks it's only going to be 6 weeks is fooling themselves. I wasn't trying to be cynical. I just said like, no, I just looked at them like, this is not going to end soon.
Hmm.
Um, and I thought of it, I'm like, okay, now that I'm going to be home for a while, I don't know when. It's kind of like being in a tunnel and there's an end to the tunnel. You just don't know when. You just have to keep walking. I was like, what do I have to do to keep walking in that tunnel to get to the very
Hmm.
end? So I spent some time going like, okay, like it was just from daily things like, um, getting up at a certain time, stopping work at a certain time, making sure I'm eating well, to figuring out. It was just for me a big opportunity. I found every silver lining I could. I found every
Hmm.
opportunity to learn. Um, and that helped me significantly. And to be perfectly honest, I'm really lucky I still have a job. It was just like these things. I'm like, I still have a job. I have a place to live. I have a really good support system, and counting everything that I do have, because let's be honest, like this pandemic completely wrecked the economy. It's
Hmm.
awful. So for me, I'm like, as hard as it is for me right now, one, I am not alone in this difficult moment. Two, I have it way better than so many people right now. And I'm not saying that to be like, oh, I'm better than everyone. I'm like, no, no, no. It's luck. It's pure luck that my job can go remote, that I have the support, that I'm on grant money, it's like that I still have benefits. It was so for me, it was thinking in that mind frame. And I know people who are in the same situation as I am. Oh, and also I have the benefits. I can still see my therapist regularly, and she helps me like talk things through and get through things on my mind. But I have friends who are also in my situation. Work remotely, in actually even better situations than me. They have a house, which is great. But mental health wise, they're doing much worse than I am. To the point where I'm getting, in certain cases, I've had to approach a few and be like, have you thought about getting a therapist? Because
Hmm.
I'm worried that
Yes.
it's deteriorating. Um, and yeah, I think the other day, JR, I don't know if you saw on Instagram. Um, so I posted a video. So I was just trying to do these things that bring me joy. So on
Hmm.
Instagram, my Instagram, which is private, I just post stories that make me happy. Like, for the beginning of this year, I can do any pull-ups. Nothing.
Yeah.
I would like, I would get on the bar and I'm like, I can't do it.
Yeah.
Um, Now I can do about 6 to 8 in a row. And that's,
Pull-ups.
yeah, pull-ups.
That's amazing. That's
Yeah,
good.
thank
That's
you,
good.
thank you.
Yeah.
For me, it's really exciting because when 2020 started, I said, as a personal health goal, I said I want to be able to do at least one pull-up by the end of the year. Um,
Uh-huh.
and I exercise on Zoom with at the gym I went to. She went onto Zoom and she still trains me.
Hmm.
She's super nice and she's my friend too. Um, so I posted a video of my progress on Instagram and I was really excited, on story.
Hmm.
And I got a lot of really sweet messages from friends. Like, oh my God, good job. I'm so proud of you. I did get one message from one person. It's always that one person. Now, I don't know him very well. We're not close. I know him
Mm-hmm.
through a close friend, but I don't know him well. He knows I have a boyfriend, so this is all context.
Uh-huh.
He responds to my post, goes, go down lower. And I said, okay. I said, okay. I responded, my okay, and I said, geez, thanks for being supportive. At first I wasn't sure if he was joking.
Mm-hmm.
And then he goes, we're Vietnamese. And I said, huh? He responded, no support, like Vietnamese don't, this is paraphrasing, it's just trying to like, Vietnamese aren't supportive. We have toxic standards. And I went, I know. I was like,
What?
whoa, I know. So it gets it gets worse. I respond, that's not true, right? Like, not all Vietnamese are like that. And he responds, I know, LOL. And I just got really mad and I said, that's rude.
Mm-hmm.
Rude, period. Then he tries to video chat with me. Now I'm not close with this person. It's weird. It's so weird.
So weird.
Right?
Yeah.
And then I decline it because I was mad. I was like, no, I'm not going to talk to you. Then he sends a follow-up message saying, this is what happens to out of work trainers. We yell at other people online because we are sad. And then apostrophes yell at their workouts. And I said, no. Now, I posted that on Instagram, like that small exchange,
Uh-huh.
part of the exchange, to like, because you can do kind of close friends only, so he couldn't see it. And
Yes.
I was like, what the actual fuck? Now,
Yeah.
yeah,
No one asked for your advice. Well,
I
like
know.
whether you're a personal trainer or like Michael Phelps coach, I don't give a shit. Like I didn't
I
ask for your advice.
I know,
You
and
didn't ask for his advice, though.
I didn't ask for his advice. And my friends saw that, they were livid. My girlfriends were like, who this guy? Who does he think? And
Yeah.
what was also phenomenal is that this is actually a very common thing for men to give unsolicited advice to women. At least 3 other women texted me saying, this has happened to me multiple times. And I said, are you fucking kidding me? My
Yes.
guy friends texted me saying, I am so sorry that you have to deal with this. This is awful. Keep doing you. My boyfriend was livid and was like, who is this guy? Why is he, I mean, which I get it. I'm like, yeah, I was pissed too. I was like, babe, I'm so mad. He's like, what happened? And I told him. He's just like, so it was one of those things. And then one of my friends said, like, it sounds like this guy needs professional help. And I said, I think he needs professional help too. But I think, so I feel, a part of me does feel bad for him. I'm like, yes, I get that you're sad. I get that you don't have work right now.
Mm-hmm.
At the same time, you are choosing to be an asshole.
Yeah, yeah.
uh, so yeah, I think when I look at the mental health status of people, um, I'm seeing it deteriorate on both spectrums. People who are out of work and are struggling, and I really get it, and I sympathize. I also, you cannot speak to me that way. You just
Mm-hmm.
cannot. And then people on the other spectrum, who do have the resources and are, economic resources, but for them, it's hard. It's hard for everybody right now. So I think right now, as we approach the winter months too, which for me has always been hard because it's cold and I can't go into. I want to bundle up all the time. Um,
Yes.
I think the mental health aspects of this pandemic are going to get more and more pronounced. So it's something I've been preparing for a while.
I think so too. And I think, yeah, like, how do you say it? Back in April and May, I
Mhm.
was with this COVID lockdown. I was feeling above average. I was feeling okay, good. I know that I lost a whole bunch of speaking contracts. I just said that's okay. Because you know, for me, emotionally, mentally, I was okay-ish. I think because it was spring and summer was around the corner. It was warmer, more daylight, and we all know that COVID is a form of flu or whatever virus. and they don't do that well outside, like under the sun, So for me, I think that there was, even though it was hard, I think I had a sense of hope. I was feeling okay. And I admit this time around, since October, especially since the daylight saving ended, was started, I become more, this time around, I become more concerned, more down, like my emotional and psychological state is a little bit below average. And I think it is, just practical reasons that I can't go out and be outside as much. The fear with the concern, even though I have my flu shot, but still, on average, wintertime, it's common that people get cold. Our immune system is lower in general, so it's easier for us to catch something, whether it's a bacteria or virus. So even though if I'm healthy, if I'm healthy, even though I'm healthy, that might, maybe even let's say that I'm asymptom to COVID. I'm one of those lucky ones. Let's just say I'm asymptom because I'm healthy-ish, And my biggest concern is that, okay, winter months are here. My immune system is going to be down. Most likely I'm going to catch some sort of cold and virus. It might not be that big of a deal, but what that means is my immune system is going to be down. What that means, I'm also going to be more prone to COVID.
Yeah.
And that's my biggest concern because over the summer, the sunlight is out, like my immune system's high. I exercise, I'm always outside getting my vitamin D3, like, and this time around, yeah, I think I'm a little bit more concerned, and options are, again, even over the summertime, the options were limited, you know, compared to pre-COVID, in terms of my social activities, in terms of things I can balance out my mental health. And winter is here, and the option is even more limited. So definitely is something. And I think that I'm not the only one that's feeling or thinking like this. I think that there are a lot of people.
Yeah. I completely agree, and I think that's the thing I worry about this winter month, and I think unfortunately um, we're going to see a lot of deaths, a lot of unnecessary deaths, and that for me is heartbreaking. Um, I think the other issue too is that, earlier when you asked, how am I doing? I'm like, oh, just watching a really bad coup attempt happen, the rest of the nation. The thing that is also upsetting for me on that end is like that lack of transition, it's like the focus is like, oh, I would like claiming, trying to steal the election, the focus is on stealing the election, when the reality is like, here's an actual pressing matter. Everyone's dying, and you really need to do something about that. And by not initiating this transition, you're really killing people. And I think what is actually also a bizarre component about this. So I don't know if you saw this, but in South Dakota, they the nurses have been reporting patients, COVID patients, who are dying, have been going, it's not COVID, it's fake news.
Yes, yeah, yep.
Yeah, and it's fucking bizarre because it's like they definitely have COVID, and I think the nurse said they only get quiet when they get intubated, and that's so depressing. Um, and South Dakota has one of the highest rates of COVID in the entire country, which is nuts.
Yes, because people went to Sturgeon's,
Hmm.
the motorcycle rally, the
Yeah.
famous one, which is the city like closed it down, but people still show up. I think thousands or hundreds of people, and I think I was reading that contributed to the widespread of COVID in the rural area in those states. Because those states were supposed to be safer than
Hmm.
California, than Colorado, because it's a little bit more rural, less population. And I think they just shot themselves in the foot because they are just being so
Nonchalant. Yeah.
yeah, like, and it just it scares me how we have become, what not we, how a lot of Americans have become so underinformed, so undereducated, so stubborn, so entitled. Like I was reading a post that my friend put out that Canadian government is going through the process of this, finalizing on how many COVID vaccine to give out to outside Canadian, to poor countries. And we unite, that is something that United States should be doing, or United States have been doing in the past, helping other nations, like kind of like this, we were, in a way, we were the leader, in, yes, we did this military industrial complex, we supported a lot of horrible governments, you name it. At the same time, United States government did do a lot of goods, over the world. And we could have played that role, supplying, giving these doses to all Americans at the same time to poor countries. However, instead, we are bickering on which race of color, which skin of color is more superior than other. How pathetic we are. Instead of really thinking about how to help each other in this country and helping others, we're debating. Hey, Q, your skin color is darker than mine. Therefore, you're superior. You're inferior. Therefore, you have to pay more. Well, you cannot. Yeah, you have to pay way more taxes, and you cannot vote. How pathetic. This is like our country has been. Instead of being this beacon of hope to be the leader, break down barriers, we are just like bickering in these little stupid issues.
No, 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 don't. I'm laughing because I'm like, it's so true. I'm like, we're not, you know, when people say, oh, this pandemic was totally unavoidable, I'm just like, oh, fuck off. Like that I have, I will say this, I will notice one thing about myself. Since the beginning of the pandemic, I was generally extending my sympathy and empathy to pretty much everyone. Now it's pretty much reserved to the most vulnerable communities. I have no patience. I specifically have no chill with anybody who freaking Karen or Kevin who goes into a store and is like, this is infringement of civil liberties and rights to wear a mask. And I'm like, okay, first off, this grocery store is private property. It's private property. It's a private company. They can set the terms of which customers they're going to serve. And if the manager says, I don't feel like endangering my workers or my customers during a global fucking pandemic, I'm going to enforce it. It's not, it's not civil liberties.
Exactly. Like you can have your right, not well, your option not to wear your mask. At the same time, grocery store also have, since it's a private entity, they have freedom and liberty too to kick you out.
Yeah, and this is it's like the same as being discriminated because you're black or because you're gay. I'm like, no, it's not, because wearing a mask is a functional PPE. Being gay or black or not white is like, you literally cannot change that.
No,
So I don't want to hear about it.
it's like, I don't like to wear pants. I don't like to wear pants, but I have to in the airport, in the grocery store. If not, I'm gonna get kicked out.
Exactly.
I might get thrown into jail too. Like so. Yeah.
It's like, I don't want to wear pants, I still wear it. Shit. It was like, so I have no patience. And I think for me, my anger is quite heightened for that type of personality, because it's like, it's not about you. You're radical. I will say this pandemic has really shown two types of people for me: radical selfishness and radical love, and radical, giving. So for me, I reserve my love and concern for people who have really come together to organize for communities and to be like, let's work together so we can help communities. That's where my love extends to, and to be like, yes, and also I do have a lot of sympathy. Like, it's hard. I do have a lot of sympathy for communities of color that are distrustful of public health. I totally get it. A lot of people don't notice, but public health actually originated from a colonialist standpoint. It was a function of British colonialism. So I totally get it when non-white people do not trust anyone from public health. I get it. Tuskegee experiments, multiple violations of human rights during the 20th century from in the pursuit of public health. Even Stephen Miller implementing like public health to decrease immigration. I'm like, no, we did that back in the day against like
Yes.
immigrants. So I get it, but I also like they're coming from their distrust of any public health entity comes from a history of being totally fucked over so many times. It's my job to break down to be like, I am so sorry about the legacy. I understand where you're coming from, why you don't trust the vaccine, why you don't trust practitioners, why you can't even integrate with the healthcare system because you don't have health insurance or whatever barriers. I'm sympathetic to them. But to the
Yes.
average Karen and Kevin who's like, "Bleh, like I want to get a manicure or a pedicure," I was like, oh, fuck you.
Yes.
Right? I have no chill. I'm like, I don't care.
Yes.
Shut up.
So, do you know in Australia they call Karens Sheilas? I just learned that, and yeah, there's a really bad stigma of public health. What's that word? Forceful to make women cannot reproduce anymore. What was that word?
Oh, forced sterilization.
Yes, and that happened to a lot of Black communities,
Yeah.
Native communities, back in the days. So
It's
yeah,
still
so it's
happening right now. It's happening right now in ICE detention centers.
yes, with immigrant, exactly. Yes, with no consent at all, no
Yeah.
consent, and talking about violating what was that oath that doctors or public
The
health?
Hippocratic oath. So I'm
Yes, the
like,
privacy consent, like First Amendment. Well, I don't know which amendment is that, but anyway, yeah,
yeah, I mean, so for me, I'm like, I completely get that perspective. It's frustrating going, it's like, come on, don't do this, just don't do this, please. But you're like, but at the same time, it's like, but I also really get, I'm like, when you're coming from a racial ethnic minority with no power, in the US, it's like you don't have a lot of options. Like you really don't. And I sympathize a lot, there's high rates of COVID among Hispanic communities. And the thing is like, like, oh, because like, Latinos and Hispanics don't care about public health. I'm like, no, 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 no. They do, but they're in a situation, they're in a living situation, like multi-generational households. They have to go to work in person. They're, if they get sick, they could get fired to take a sick, it's like, so for me, I'm like, I'm like, look, in those situations, I'm like, they're in a bad situation to begin with. I'm not going to fault them for trying to survive in an already
hmm
terrible situation.
hmm
Like, just for example, I know from a friend who works at a tennis club, the maintenance workers, they're Latino, Hispanic, and they definitely were sick of COVID. And the manager, who's white, was like, "You still come in." My friend was pissed. She's like, they have COVID. The manager was like, COVID's not real. And then finally, when they tested positive for COVID, they had already gone into work multiple times. And then the boss
yeah,
was like, why do they need sick day? So for me, I'm like, I don't get mad. I'm like, I'm not mad at the workers who have no choice but to come in. They don't have a choice. I'm pissed
yes,
at the people in positions of power who make those dumbass calls and violate all kinds of like health, and safety for people. But
exactly. I was reading. What was that meat packaging company? Tyson.
mhm.
Um, shoot, I forgot what happened. Yeah, they force employees to go in. If not, they're gonna get fired, and they did not provide sufficient PPE. And on top of that, remember back, I think back in June, Trump signed like a couple executive orders to tackle COVID, and those were bogus because if you read a lot of detail, well, try to protect companies, whatever. If you read detail, like fine prints, one of those executive orders actually protects corporations, manager owners for not getting lawsuit from encouraging their employees to come in to work even they have COVID. So employees cannot sue company if they have COVID and they were forced to go in, and they cannot sue the company from the sick days thing. They if they needed to take sick days, and the company say no, you don't. COVID doesn't exist. So it's just so fucked up. They are protected by this stupid, horrible, corrupted executive order.
Oh yeah. And it doesn't. The only thing that would surprise me about Trump if he did something actually decent. Like someone was telling me like, "Oh my God, can you believe this?" And I'm just sitting here like, "Yeah, yes I can." But like, how can you? I'm like this is the same guy. Which guy are we talking about? Are you
Yeah.
talking about? It's like him not doing something awful and horrible and inhumane would be the strangest thing. And I'm like, what's happening? And yeah, I think one thing that COVID has exposed is that um, there's for me, I think I've seen these gaps in American social safety net for years. Access to insurance, access to healthcare, access, the basic things to ensure that like you can live a life and still be protected.
Hmm.
And now COVID has exposed those gaps to the point where and not just healthcare but racism too. It's like racism was quantified this election cycle. It was, more people voted for Trump. I'm also not surprised. I'm just sitting here like, yeah, that sounds about right. um and racism with how George Floyd was murdered, and more Black Americans were murdered this year too. And it's one of those things like you just cannot ignore it anymore. It just really came. It's one of those things I'm like, if you ignore it, you're ignoring a basic function and aspect of reality. And I think the also thing I realized this year too, it's like someone was telling me, I was like, I don't understand people who are presented as evidence. It's COVID. There's Black lives do matter because Black people are being murdered with impunity by the state. Cops are the state. They should work for us, not against us. And they're killing, our fellow
Hmm.
citizens. And and people are gonna be, oh, not all cops. I'm like, yes, not all cops, but like, let's be perfectly honest. When it gets to the point where it happens on a semi-regular basis, it's a bad thing. you know, um, like if cops shouldn't be killing people who are mentally ill, they just shouldn't.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, and and I think now I realize I'm like, there's a couple things going on, and then you addressed it earlier. Was like, um, a lot of people in this country are very entitled and very spoiled, and having anything disrupt their comfort um, is upsetting enough. So even the very idea of wearing a mask, it's ever so slightly uncomfortable. You get mask acne. Ooh, it's like collectively you can still do the remainder of your things. You can even make it really fashionable and really fun. But just the very reality of COVID is like, oh no, it's inconveniencing my lifestyle. I'm like, well, too fucking bad. And same thing
Yeah.
goes like, well, why should I care about Black Lives Matter? Why should I care about, people getting murdered by cops? Have they done nothing? Why should I care? It's never happened to me. And I'm like, just because it's your lived reality does not mean it's someone else's lived reality. And
Exactly.
yeah, so COVID has really exposed that. And
Yes. And even look at right now that those hardcore Trump supporters, or people that hardcore ones, well, the right wing ones
mhm,
that voted for him, somehow have you noticed the oxymoron? Somehow they can see widespread of voter fraud, which is not there, which there's no evidence, but somehow they don't see racism
yeah,
as a systematic issue. They don't see COVID as a pandemic, but somehow they can see widespread of voting fraud. It just again that this is scary. And I'm talking about really that they are a lot of these people. I don't know the numbers, but I would assume millions of these people, the right wing people, do believe, see that this system is against them because they are so entitled. They aren't able to absorb and digest new information. And
Hmm.
somehow racism and COVID just aren't there. Well, not true. So it is, for me, it's Blizzard. And I think if that population of people, my biggest concern is that if that population of people continue to grow and expand in this country, we are fucked. We are fucked. You know, like so and my other concern with question is that, maybe we can talk about this in the future, like yeah, there's that 30%, 20 to 30% American population that are do believe in this, that are die-hard right-wing Trump supporter, and what can we do? Like education, stuff like that. So I know that is a huge other bigger question, and we can.
Yeah, no, I'm actually really, I think before we end, it's funny, I was just talking to a really close friend about the same thing yesterday, and she's Muslim Indian, lives in Ohio, and for her, she's telling me like, what it's like to live there as like a non-white, specifically non-white Muslim woman.
Mhm.
I still worry about her all the time, to be perfectly honest, because I'm like, oh my God, Islamophobia is very vibrant in this country. And she's just like, for her, she's like, she's scared. And I'm sitting here, I'm like, yeah, I get it. Um, but here's what I posit this to her. I said, look, um, here's something to also consider. Yes, more people voted for Trump this year. But if you look at the popular vote, like how many more people voted for Biden, and I'm not even a Biden stan, by the way.
All
I'm
right.
like, it's literally like I want it as like the baseline minimal decency. Like hearing coherent sentences is a weird thing for me. That's when I'm like, we're fucked. Coherent sentences,
Yeah.
ah, but regardless of political ideology, it was like, but I said, look, I told her, and I wanted to just to tell you, like, bring this up again. It's like more people voted for Biden. We are the majority. Majority were people rejected. And if you
Yes.
look at the increase of Trump voters, you look at them. It's not actually surprising, and like it's mostly the types, the Kevins and the Karens and the
Yes.
Kevins of who have been around for a while, but they're still for me, I'm like, yes, racism was quantified, and it was also shown to be not the majority. If it was the
Exactly.
opposite, if Trump had won the popular vote and Biden had won the electoral college, I'd be like, we're
Huge
fucked.
concern. Yep. Yep.
Yeah.
I think Biden won the popular vote by 6 million. 5 million was 6 million. I think that's like one of the biggest margins.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
So when I think about that, I said, look, and the other thing I also look historically too, I'm like, look, when we look at the founding of the US, yes, it has these ideals, but it's also these lived realities are not mutually exclusive. The US also has a very dark side. It's began as a ethno-fascist state. There was, it committed horrendous genocide against indigenous Americans. It engaged in a transatlantic slavery, complete like ethnic, racial, cultural genocide.
Mm-hmm.
Um, that is the origin. That is the original sin of the U.S. There's no getting around that, and so fascism is a very strong part of the founding of this country. And just for scale, the German Nazis, took cues from the US in terms of creating their concentration camps and also their Nazi ideology.
Yes. Yeah.
So it's not like, that's a piece of history a lot of people don't like to talk about. But when you look at the documentation, you're like, oh shit, that looks like right next to my house, you know? Um, and the thing is, I said, look, it's there. And if we don't acknowledge it, there's no way we can deal with it. On the flip side though, I will say, in terms of the eternal war between good and evil, when you look at this, like 6 million plus votes for good, I'm like, that is for me, that gives me hope. I'm like, okay, we can still do this. And really, like, people were celebrating Biden and Harris, and I said, for me, I'm not the type to celebrate um, heroes or something. I'm like, no, I get the need for it, but for me, I was like, this is the time to celebrate community organizing. holy shit, that community
Yes.
organizing, that's amazing. I want to get like, I remember looking at Georgia because my friend and I were running numbers like since
Uh-huh.
and every day we stuck to keep our mental health in check. We stuck to math, and we were like, all right, let's do the math today. You know, also just for scale, she and I hate math, so you just
Oh
that's
yeah.
how much we were like dealing with it. And
Yes.
we were looking at the at Georgia and Philadelphia, we're like, oh my god, like we're like we were both like, I think he's gonna like even though it looks red right now, I think he's gonna win these states and in Nevada too, and in Arizona too. And then we were like, we're just watching and we're counting. We're like, oh my God,
Yes.
there's no way that Trump could win. There's no way. So and we're like, how does this work? And we looked at more closely and like, it's community organizing. They've been doing it since
Exactly.
2018. And that is amazing. That is something, I'm like, that is something so worth to be celebrating. So
Exactly.
yeah.
Yeah, I agree. And I think even what Biden has done, again, like Biden is not my ideal candidate, but I'm really, really happy that he won.
Hmm.
And just one simple example that I feel hopeful under his presidency is that the COVID transition team that he has assembled. Like I looked through the list. In fact, he hired the former Surgeon General under Obama, the Indian American. He's awesome. I met him before. And the team that Biden assembled, they're all renowned, respected doctors, scientists, public health practitioners. And that itself, it just, I know, like, it should be like this already. But it's, you know what I'm saying? It's just crazy. So who did Trump assemble? Whole bunch of business, unqualified people that are business people. Jared Kushner, his son-in-law, that has absolutely no position, no business in COVID team. And it just is, yeah, it's common sense at the same time. It's awesome that Biden's assemble a qualified team.
Yeah.
And it shouldn't be it is one of this again is one of those oxymoron. It should be like this in the first place, and so I'm just really, really happy that Biden is committed. Well, his team is committed with this whole COVID. So, that tells me that they are serious about fighting this. So that definitely gives me hope. So
Yeah, no, it's a long journey ahead, and it's not gonna. I mean, we got the vaccine, you know, met like we got the vaccine results. I would say personally, and just to hold off, like wait for the people who need it the most. Like I am not
exactly.
essential. I'll be perfectly. I am not essential. We don't even know how long the antibodies work. If the vaccine is a lifetime, or you need it like a flu shot. Like by the way, get
Hmm.
your flu shot. I got a really cool like
Oh,
stand in a
nice,
flu fighter. I was like, oh, this is amazing. You know.
nice.
Um, but yeah, so we don't know if it's going to be like every year you have to get a COVID shot, or we don't know. But
Well,
it's one of those things. I'm like, this changes a lot of things, and I will say, I'm like, but just still, like, we still have to keep working together. You can't just drop the end game. We're like, we're done, we're done. It's like, no, we have to still keep going. So,
we
um,
do.
yeah. So I know it will be okay eventually. I think the way I see it, I'm like, just know that even though you feel like you're walking down a tunnel with no light at the end, just keep walking. You'll get to the end eventually. Don't stop, and you eventually will see the light. And it's gonna be it'll be different, you know.
Yes, exactly. So cool. All right. I know that I think both of us have to hop off to our next meeting. So Q, thank you so much. And for those that are watching this, again, thank you so much for watching or listening to us. Thank you so much for listening and watching us. And we will see you next time, hopefully next week. So yeah, so Q and I definitely are planning to record or resume our podcast ish more often. So all right then, be safe, be well. See you
Okay.
all later.